Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. This talk is entitled The Application Security State of the Union. So just very quickly, a few things about me. My name is Chris Romeo. I'm the CEO of Curve Ventures. I have been involved in the world of security for 25 plus years, and I've been focused on AppSec for probably the last 15 years or so. Previously, before Curve Ventures, I was the CEO at Security Journey, which was acquired back in May 2022, and I was at Cisco for 10 years as the Chief Security Advocate. I'm also a big fan of creating podcasts, so if you're a podcast fan, I've got 3 different ones. Probably the most popular one is the Application Security Podcast. Not a super original name, I understand, but you'll kind of know what we're going to talk about. You won't be surprised with the content with the Application Security Podcast. So, plus I've got the Security Table, and the Threat Modeling Podcast is a new one that I just launched here. So feel free to check those out. Also, I'm still a fan of Twitter, so feel free to carry on the conversation there as we go forward. So just to kind of set the stage for us a little bit, let's think about 20 years ago in application security. So I'm curious, first of all, show of hands, who in the room here would say like you work in application security specifically? Okay, that's what I was expecting. All right, has anybody been doing application security for more than 10 years? Okay, how about more than 15 years? Okay, 20-ish years? All right, some of y'all are going to remember this, the things that I'm talking about here then. Awesome. All right, so when you think about 20 years ago, though, in application security, AppSec wasn't even really that prevalent of a term. It was relatively new kind of a thing that people were thinking about. We didn't have AppSec teams inside of companies. We didn't have degrees in security even back in those days. OWASP was really in its infancy 20 years ago. We think about how far that's come, but also think about from a technical perspective. Remember this thing called HTTP? We used to use it for all of our conversations between browsers and web servers. Cross-site scripting, only 1 or 2 papers had been written about it at that point. SQL injection was still relatively new on the scene as well. There was no such thing as the application security tool market that we think of right now. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage as we think about the state of the union. Where is application security? I thought it was good to reflect for just a moment on the last 20 years. Where are we coming from to better understand where are we today and then where are we going into the future? So I thought, if we're going to do a State of the Union, we should probably at least agree on a definition. And so I kind of grabbed a couple of them just to see. And the first one I have labeled that appropriately as random vendor definition. So, protect the innocent or whatever. Using tools and processes to secure applications across their life cycle. Yeah, it feels kind of like a vendor definition because tools are in the first couple of words of the definition. Of course, I went to the source of all eternal knowledge and everything known on the internet, Wikipedia. Also not too bad of a definition. All tasks introduce a secure software development lifecycle to development teams. I still thought it was missing a couple of things, and so there's my definition. When I'm thinking about the State of the Union, this is what I'm using to funnel all the information I'm going to share with you. So for me, it's the process of increasing security assurance. It's an important word, making our things that we build more secure through the combined efforts of people, tools, and governance. So it's a process that the people act upon, that use the tools, and has a governance angle to it. And so in this State of the Union, this kind of working my way up from the bottom, this is what I'm going to cover for you in the time I have here today. We're going to talk in general about how mature is AppSec and what's the general pulse of our industry. I'm going to get into what I see as the state of the environment right now. What do we have to secure as AppSec professionals? And then we'll talk about programmatic best practices from my experience. What are the things that I think you should be doing? What are the things I see the top companies that have application security programs, what are they doing today with their efforts? And then the last one, I'll talk a little bit about the state of the art from my perspective, and then some thoughts I have on the future, kind of looking forward about 10 years. And so it's important to just stop and say, kind of my primary goal for this session for you is really to help you grow in that knowledge and understanding of where we are as AppSec and also kind of where we're going. Because at the end of the day, we can only secure what we know and what we understand. And so let's dive right in. First 10 or 15 slides or so, I'm going to throw a lot of data at you, okay? And one thing to remember here, as I got to this talk of creating it, I realized This is kind of a choose your own adventure action item talk. Like there's going to be so many things in here that you could act upon. I'm just going to let you know now, write them down. I'm not going to give you a nice set of action items at the end. There's just a lot of things here. So if you're not familiar with the TOB index, I was not until someone introduced me to it. But the TOB index, what they do is they have this complicated algorithm that they scan all kinds of things across the internet to figure out what are the most popular languages. And they do this monthly, so you can see from a trend line perspective where languages are coming and going from. And so if you go to TOB right now, you'll see a newer version than the data that I have right here because it's always updated. And so we think about the languages that we see here, Python. I mean, I was shocked that C and C++ together are making up, 8 or 28% of development efforts that are happening right now. Because you think about AppSec and how much time do we think about C and C++? Probably not as much as we should. We focus heavily on the web when we think AppSec. But then look at some of the other things that are popping up on this list now. You see Go, you see Rust, you see some of these newer languages. And so it's important to remember, as AppSec, like none of these languages are secure. Like nobody created these languages. There's no secure language. Even Rust they did a lot of things from a memory management perspective, a lot of things to protect the developer from doing things that could cause future exploits to be in Rust code. But at the end of the day, none of these things is a secure language. None of them were created that way. And as AppSec, you could have in an enterprise, how many of those? I got the top 20 there. But some of you may have an enterprise where you have 10 of those, or 10 plus of those that you have to work with. So how about frameworks? There's a lot of frameworks out there. This is from a survey of developers. The reason that it adds up to more than 100% is that there are developers use multiple frameworks, so there's not, if a developer doesn't usually use just one web framework, and that's it for me. But what this also shows us is that, from the top of that list going down, you've got Node, you've got React, you've got jQuery, Express, Angular, Vue. These are the top JavaScript web framework languages. But once again, there's a lot of them there. And they're all part of what we have to do from an application security perspective. Okay, how about cloud native? So, percent of people surveyed that have adopted cloud native in some way. This is from the CNCF, Cloud Native Computing Foundation's survey. But if you look from right to left on that top, nearly all of our development is cloud native, 30%, much, some, not much, and then all the way down to 0. But what we're seeing here is cloud native, as you might expect. People are moving in a cloud native perspective. That influences us as application security. It influences what we have to secure. And then the last part there, 60% of organizations with less developed cloud native techniques only use containers in pilot projects. So 62% there. So that also kind of balances out this thought that those that are leading from a cloud native perspective, or if you're not leading from a cloud native, you're going to be lagging in a lot of other pieces as well. Excuse me. Okay, so that's cloud native. How about containerization? So this is from Sysdig's report here. Number of running containers surveyed from various enterprises. But look at that. I mean, 1 to 100. But look at the 501 to 1,000, 1,001 to 5,000, 5,001 plus. What does that tell us? There's a lot of containers. Containerization is here. It's going to stay. This is how we're deploying applications. Once again, we got to secure it because it's used so much. API. API is also, it's the root of everything that we do, it seems like today. It's the primary thing that we focus on. But when you think about asking developers and security people about the current state of the API from a security perspective, high concern, some concern, low concern, outdated zombie APIs. We know that the inventory problem, being able to inventory what APIs we have is a challenge. Account takeover, misuse, denial of service. We know API from a security perspective has a lot of different things that we need to be concerned about. And we're using API everywhere. How about container security? So we talked about the proliferation of containers and where we are today. How about container security? So this is from Sysdig's report as well. But I mean, these numbers, I think these are the same numbers we've been seeing for the last number of years. Like we haven't made a big improvement in container vulnerabilities. Critical vulnerabilities that exist in running containers are still a gigantic problem. 87% of container images have higher criticals. 90% are using permissions, or granted permissions are not used. What does that tell us? We have a least privilege problem. or creating containers that have access to do anything that they want to do, but 90% of those privileges that are being granted to containers are never used. So what does that tell you? We gotta limit the privileges that are extended there. And then 15% of high and critical vulns are in use at runtime. So these vulnerabilities are being carried into production. They're not just in the images that are defining the containers. They're being carried forth into production as well. So that's the state of containers, I guess. How about orchestration? The first numbers on the left side are from once again the CNCF. 49% of those surveyed are using Kubernetes in production. 20% are piloting it. So a lot of people are either using Kubernetes today or they're planning for it. And just take a look at that list of all the different things people are using Kubernetes for. The blue is last year, the green is this year. This is the increase in what's happening, what Kubernetes is being used for, and the increase in how it's being used. So we talked containers and orchestration. How about cloud complexity and the role that infrastructure as code is having here? So Firefly gave us this data in their infrastructure as code report. 42% of those surveyed have more than 10 cloud accounts. 10 different cloud accounts making up all their infrastructure, 10 or more. 44% of people are using multiple cloud providers. And then 80% have, more than half of their cloud is codified into infrastructure as code. So they're using infrastructure as code to deploy all of these things. But what can we conclude looking at those numbers? Like the use of cloud, this is a very complex predicament that we find ourselves in. People are using multiple clouds, there's a lot of diversity in how they're approaching solving their application deployment, but that also can bring a challenge from a security perspective, because the more complex the environment we're trying to secure, the more difficult it is what we have to do with it. Okay, this is the one that probably won't surprise you, because we've been hearing for the last number of years that DevOps is here, DevOps is it. These numbers shouldn't surprise you. I actually thought these numbers might be a little bit low when I saw them. 44% people, using DevOps platforms. CI/CD is on board, 35%. That almost seems like a little bit low. But we know, DevOps is part of what we have to do from an AppSec perspective. So let's stop for a second and just summarize where we've been, thinking about the environment. So we talked about the fact that we have all these different languages, all these different frameworks. The more derivatives that we have, the more derivatives that we use, the more guidance that we have to provide for developers on how to use those languages. We talked about containerization and the role it has and the security threats that come through it. Orchestration, containerization, orchestration, these aren't going away. They're here. This is how we're going to deploy applications until somebody thinks of a better way to do it. We talked about cloud complexity and the challenges that has. DevOps is here. But really, when we stop and think about all these things, all these numbers that I just shared with you from all these different reports and different people that have collated all this data, none of these things would anybody say are mature. All of these things are still in their security infancy right now. If AppSec, we've only been thinking about AppSec for 20 years, most of the things that I just talked about didn't exist 20 years ago when we started this thing. And so we are definitely in our infancy in how we're approaching the security of all these different pieces. So let's switch gears now and talk about AppSec specifically. So the first numbers that I brought were from Tromso's report, their AppSec report, and they just asked people, how has the volume of vulnerabilities issues changed over the past 12 months? 20% of people, they've increased 5x or more. I mean, I bet you nobody will raise their hand if I say, who wants their AppSec issue load to go up 5x this next year? I got no takers. Nobody in this room is going to say me, because but then you kind of go down the stack, 4x, 3x, 2x. This is everybody is experiencing more issues. And so that's kind of where we can conclude. Now, tools and services. This was from the AppSec Trends from Enso, another AppSec startup. And so, when you look at that stack on the left, these are kind of the things you would expect to see here. Pen testing, static application security testing, web application firewall, dynamics, software composition analysis, pipeline security, and they're kind of reporting on the numbers of percentages of what people are doing. Now, some of the things that fell in the bottom of their list Threat modeling and design review. For me, that one, like I saw that number and I was like, wow, that's like the bottom of what people are thinking about. Fuzzing, mobile application security testing, looking at attack surface, external attack surface management. But what this kind of forces me to conclude here is tools do continue to drive what we think of as application security. Like to those original definitions that I shared, most people think AppSec equals tools, equals SAST, DAST, SCA, all of those things. And in reality, AppSec is, like I've just already been talking about, it's so much more. It's people, it's process. It is tools and technology, that's a big part of it, but also governance. It's not just the tool stack. So, I even looked up in the Verizon data breach report because I figured I've looked at every other report that exists on the internet. Might as well look at one of the ones that's been around for the longest time here. And it won't shock you to see that web applications are still one of the primary vectors that are used for data breaches. Even though it doesn't seem like anybody really cares about data breaches that much anymore, at least in public. I care about them. I'm sure everybody here does as well. Okay, how about activities of AppSec? I pulled this data from BSIM, so if you're, the Building Security and Maturity Model, and I thought it was interesting just to see what are the things that are the top activities that companies are doing from an AppSec perspective. If you don't know BSIM, it's vendors pay to be a part of this consortium. They get assessed against a whole big stack of criteria, and then all that data gets brought together. But I thought it was interesting to see what they're saying their top activities are. Implementing security checkpoints, ensuring host and network security basics are in place, identify privacy obligations, create, interfaces with incident response, perform security feature review. These are all things that I would have thought that the most mature programs on earth, these would just be the table stakes. Like they would have other things, like these things would be the bottom of what they're concerned with, and they would be focused on, some type of new things. But then it was also interesting just to see the growth by count of their activities, because there is some new things that are coming in there. Implementing cloud security controls, controlling open source risk. Obviously, that's on top of everybody's mind. Even something like creating a security portal. But it did cause me to conclude, even the top of the industry, those that are spending the most money, the most budget out of anybody, are really still focused on a lot of the basics. So how about the state of threats and risks? There's no better place that I can think of to go to understand the state of threats and risks than looking at some of the top OWASP top 10 lists. Because there are a lot more than just the top 10 that everybody thinks of when we say OWASP top 10. There's Kubernetes, and there's the CI/CD security risks, and AI is even a new one. And so all of these help us to think about currently, the state of the union from a threat and risk perspective for me in AppSec is driven by what we have on these top 10 lists. And so, the latest version of the kind of primary OWASP top 10 that's come out is 2021. This is one most people in this room are probably most familiar with. We did see some things change from the list from previous years. Injections all the way down to A3 now. I feel like we're making maybe a little bit of progress there as an industry. Broken access control kind of makes its way up into the top seed. But once again, if you want to understand where we are from a threat and risk perspective, it starts at the OWASP top 10, the primary one, and then it definitely boils down from there. The OWASP API top 10 has a new version here that's coming out for 2023. And so this list is not the released version. This is the one that's coming out of their GitHub right now. But when I think about the prevalence of API in all the things that you're trying to secure, this is the list that I think is even more important than the primary OWASP top 10. Because especially in a web world, if you're living in a web world and that's the applications that you're building, this is really what you need your developers to understand. This really defines the issues that they have to fix. And look at it. In the top 5, you've got 3 different broken authorizations. Broken object level, broken object property level, broken function level authorizations. Do your developers today know what those things are and know how to design around them or fix them if they've already been built in? That's part of embracing kind of the state of threat and risk from an AppSec perspective. So the 2 project leads for the top 10 CI/CD security risks actually released this project around RSA last year. and did a great talk here. If you want to go look in the archives, they did an excellent talk going into all the details. But when you think about the challenges that our build pipelines have come under, the amount of scrutiny that attackers are putting forth towards the pipelines you use to build software, it just makes sense that this is another big part of the threat and risk. Like all of the different ways that somebody could try to attack your build infrastructure is something that you have to understand. Inadequate identity and access management for the build infrastructure itself. Dependency chain abuse. Once again, supply chain kind of making its way back in. Poison pipeline. Like there's 10 different things that you really have to understand here that are impacting how you build software. I don't know, has anybody heard about this AI thing? I don't know, maybe, you probably haven't heard about it. It's kind of big on the internet right now, this whole ChatGPT and generative AI and everything. But Rob Vanderveer created this list, the AI, or this document, the AI Security and Privacy Guide, and put together this list of attacks that you see right there. I mean, AI brings a whole new level of things that we as AppSec folks, we got to weigh in on. We can't just leave this for the AI department or I don't know who's doing AI inside of big companies. Is there an AI department? I don't know. Probably should be. But we as AppSec people are going to be the ones that are going to be challenged to deal with the attacks and things that are on this list right now. And it's data poisoning attack. Can somebody poison the model in some way to cause the AI to give a bad answer to a question? Can somebody just steal the whole model? Can somebody manipulate the input? What happens with code, supply chain? How does supply chain play into that? So once again, if we're thinking about the state of threats and risks in AppSec, we got to be thinking about AI now. Because if your organization is not turning to you yet for assistance in securing what you're doing from an AI perspective, how much time is it going to be until they do? They're going to be coming to the AppSec folks saying, we need help to secure this thing. And hopefully you can get involved in it before it gets completely out the door. I threw the Kubernetes top 10 in there. Just once again, another excellent document that describes the issues that you could have from an orchestration perspective. And when I studied Kubernetes a few years ago, the thing that really blew me away is Kubernetes has a lot of built-in security features. The challenge is very seldom do they get properly deployed and configured and used in production. And so Kubernetes is something that you can dive a lot deeper into, and there's really a lot of security things you can do with it, and we don't have time to dive into all of those things or get into them, but just know that there is a lot more there, and most people are not using most of it. Okay, we can't talk about threat and risk without at least throwing the supply chain. Thank you to Sonatype every year for giving me this depressing number about how much worse the world of the use of dependency is. How many more times people are downloading vulnerable dependencies when it seems like we should know better at this point, but I guess that's a little bit on us as AppSec people too. But 742% average annual increase in supply chain attacks in the past 3 years. Like, wow, that's a pretty big number. And once again, I love that Sonatype draws this. 6 out of every 7 are coming from transitive dependencies. Like if you've ever wondered what a transitive dependency is, you should build a JavaScript app with Node. For those people that have done it, you'll understand the humor in this. You add 3 packages, and then you run an update, and all of a sudden, an npm install, and all of a sudden you have 784 packages. How did those 3 packages need 784 packages to make this whole thing successful? That's that's really the core of the problem that we have, at least from a Node and JavaScript perspective, with the supply chain, is that people have used so many different packages. So now you talk about transitive dependencies. I've got 748 packages. I don't even have time to look at them to see what's been included in my app. And that's before I really build out a full-fledged app. So it just speaks to kind of where we are from a supply chain perspective. So, when we think about AppSec here, just to summarize that, we saw how the issue growth is going through the roof. Tool use, from my perspective, I thought the percentages of tool usage was actually going to be higher than that. I was surprised to see that SAST and DAST and some of these staples are not being used as much as I thought they were. Web apps are data breach magnets. We saw from BSIM that the most mature are even focusing on the basics. Once again, we're talking about AppSec still in its infancy. The good news for that, though, is there's a lot of opportunity for you as AppSec professionals to build strong programs. There's opportunities still for you to go in to a place where they've never had an AppSec team before. Now, that's a pretty exciting thing, versus coming into an environment where somebody's already been doing this for 20 years and you got to somehow try to make marginal improvements. Being able to go into something where it's brand new that can be a really exciting opportunity. Okay, so could the rest of the OWASP universe save the day here? Could it help us to move forward and be better from an AppSec perspective? I would say yes. I mean, there's a lot of hidden gems in the OWASP world that people have never even heard of. Like, I'm guessing if you look across this whole list of icons and things, there's things up here you don't know what they are. There's a few people in the room I see that would know what they are. But, for most people, you'd be looking at this and going, okay, so what is Cyclone DX? As an SBOM project at OWASP. What about the cheat sheet series? Like, have you ever used the cheat sheet series to figure out how to do what I think is one of the hardest problems in computing, how to properly store passwords in a database? Seems like it should be so easy. There's a cheat sheet that goes with that. You've got OWASP testing guides, you've got Juice Shop, you've got Dependency Track to do a full-on kind of analysis of all your SBOMs from an enterprise perspective. The point is there's a lot of things in the OWASP universe, and I didn't want to go any further in this talk without stopping and just acknowledging it so that you as AppSec people can go and dive deeper into what OWASP can do for you. Because there's just a lot of really good stuff that exists there. Okay, so let's talk about the state of the art now and the state of how we're doing. I already kind of let this out as a my kind of thoughts on how the tools and technology tend to overweight what I think people are describing AppSec as today. And so I think we've got an opportunity to be able to make some changes. But when we think about state of the art or the perfect, where else could I go other than OWASP SAM? Because OWASP SAM is an OWASP project that takes all of the different best practices and best things that you could do in running your AppSec program and gives you a way to measure how you're doing those and also the way to create a roadmap from the SAM itself to be able to figure out where you want to go in the future. So if I think it's state of the art, this is for me is the closest I can get to state of the art because it's practitioner driven. It's not driven by, we looked at a bunch of companies and we just listed all the things they did and then we called that the best. This is based on hours and months and years of debate about what goes into a proper application security program and function and all the different pieces. So if you've never looked at OWASP SAM, it's up to version 2 right now. Take a look at that. We don't have time. That's a whole talk unto itself to go into the depth that you'll find there. What about the state of the art with people? So I've been talking about strong security culture for a number of years. And it's cool to see it kind of now starting to come in to be a part of how people are approaching things. But when I think about being the state of the art with people, it comes down to having that strong security culture where the people are really, they have the knowledge, they have the experience, they can apply that to really moving things forward in your application security program. So I think another best practice from a people perspective is security education. Very seldom do I find anybody who will say, my developers, they just knew everything they needed to know about security when they got here. We're still dealing with that void of knowledge between what a developer learns before they come to your company, what they learn in university, what they learn on however they learn languages and frameworks. There's still a void to the things they need to know about application security to really write secure code. And so I think the best practice, the state of the art with people is having that strong program that brings them up to speed, prepares them to secure the things that they're building for you. Another best practice with people for me is something that I've experienced called security coaches. It's this idea of put some people on your AppSec team and their entire job is to go and work with developers one-on-one or a few and helping them with security challenges that they face. Kind of like a life coach or a personal fitness coach, except for security. So they're not going to go spend the rest of their year with one or two people. They're going to just drop in, they're going to help them with something, and then they're going to fly away and find some other people to influence. I think that's a best practice. And then security champions is something that I also think is something you just have to have. That is state of the art now. You're never going to have enough security people for the number of developers that you have. Unless you have some model, and I've only ever heard of one company that had a model where they tried to track their security people, the ratio, and keep the ratio 2 to 1 or 4 to 1 or whatever of developers to security people. I don't think it's very feasible, and so the way we counter that is with security champions, where we invite the developer population to join us as security and work with us for success. So how about the state of the art with process and governance? So, when I think state of the art with this, process is one of the things I think has been around for the longest time. Like, I think of what Microsoft was doing with secure development lifecycle back in, the early 2000s. I think that has probably one of the richest histories of the different areas that we look at here. And so when I think about what's the state of the art, what's the best practice here, it's really having that methodology complete approach to secure development lifecycle, and we got to have 100% participation if we're going to be state of the art. We can't have that one team that doesn't need to do it because somebody said they didn't have to do it or whatever. Like, that's not state of the art. State of the art is applying this universally to everybody. Another thing I'm expecting with the state of the art is full visibility and accountability into what's happening across that fleet of things that we build. Dashboards, metrics, I got to be able to see all of that. I can't be having meetings to discuss it. I need a dashboard that shows me where we are with all of these things. That's state of the art. And then there's got to be consequences if people don't meet a minimum standard. That's part of really taking this program to where it needs to go. All right, how about state of the art with tools and technology? This is the one I'm expecting to take the most heat on, but that's okay. So, when I think of the things that are table stakes from a tooling perspective, for me these days it's SAST, it's software composition analysis, runtime application self-protection, and then a training approach. I start to level things from level 2. I got to have pipeline stuff. I got to have my attack surface management, my correlation engines that are going to take all those issues and allow us to process it. I got to have a story for infrastructure as code, and then my web app and API protection as well. For those that are the most mature, in my mind, it's pen test and bug bounty that are being layered on top of it. Yes, I put some things below the line, some things that I don't think the state of the art in AppSec requires going forward. And when I think, and the one I've probably taken the most heat at is from, and people that I've shown this to already, was DAST. It's putting DAST up there and saying, hey, DAST doesn't need, but here's why I don't think DAST is a great investment. You can't scan an entire application in a DevOps pipeline with DAST. At least I haven't found a tool that'll do it yet. If you've invented it, please let me know. I'd love to look at it. But there's just, to me, DAST doesn't scale to the speed of DevOps, what I need to do there. And I can gain enough assurance from the other pieces that I've got here, plus I've got my pen test and my bug bounty to really be the thing that kind of wraps up this whole story for me. And so that's why I put it there. I put WAF there just because, I ran a startup. We had a full web application infrastructure running in the cloud. I never even thought about WAF. I used the runtime application self-protection, agent running inside the application. It's looking at all the requests coming in. It's dropping things. It's alerting on things. I couldn't even think of a reason to deal with WAF and all of the, cloak and dagger of people trying to create rules, people trying to get around rules. It's too much effort. So that's what I think of as the state of the art from kind of the tool perspective. So then I was thinking so much about tools, I thought, I'm going to scour the industry from startups from the last couple of years, and I'm just going to try to put them in buckets, and I'm going to try to answer, do these buckets of where the startup ecosystem in AppSec is going right now, do these answer or solve all of our problems? And so there's a lot of folks that are focused on preventing data leakage in source code repos, passwords, keys, all those different types of things. There's workload protection and prevention, so running an agent inside of the container that's feeding back on everything it's seeing, giving us good blockage. There's so many API companies out there right now that are inventorying and providing protection. And there's posture management doing correlation. There's all-in-one. This is a new category that I've just got introduced to in the last number of months. This idea of an all-in-one AppSec platform. And so where they've created their own SaaS, their own SCA, their own tooling, and their own pipeline, and they don't even take anything from the outside. They don't take external tools feeding into it. So that's an interesting approach, interesting way to try to do this. And then cloud security automation. So, I think there's a lot of good things happening in the AppSec startup ecosystem here, but none of these things seem like they're really going to really take us to the whole next level. Like these all seem like point solutions that they're going to help us incrementally improve, but none of these things is going to take us and push us over the line. So I want to spend the last few minutes I have here talking about some of the things I think are going to be big in the future. So first, my first future thought to share is I really think the AppSec market's going to consolidate greatly here. I think what you're going to see happen is a number of different tool providers are going to consolidate and buy each other. I think you're going to see software composition analysis and SaaS start to merge together. Like, I don't know why we have those as separate tools. Like, we're trying to influence the pipeline and include these things in the pipelines. Why do we have all these different kind of derivatives of the tools? Why aren't they consolidated and working together? And we've already started to see the beginnings of the developer tool market kind of eating the AppSec tools. When you think about like what is GitHub, GitHub's all their Dependabots and GitHub Actions and all their code scanning and stuff you can do native to GitHub. And GitLab's doing some of the same things there. And so, I think instrumentation's another thing, another area where the tooling can really help us to get a lot better. And, I think of like runtime application self-protection is really just the starting point inside the web apps. I think that concept and idea can do a lot more. So, in the next number of years, I think we're going to get better at the simpler things. When I think about like how far JavaScript frameworks that are released today have come from where they were, frameworks that were released 10 years ago, like a lot of the new frameworks they're thinking about security. They're building security in, the same thing we've been asking for forever. And they're doing that and applying it. Seamless application inventories, I think, is another way that we're gonna get better at the simpler things. I think in the next number of years, we're gonna see the software supply chain thing solved. And really what gives me some hope and makes me think like what we should actually do for the software supply chain, think about what Let's Encrypt has done for the world of web server certificates. Like, when's the last time you worried about a web server certificate? Like, we don't have to anymore because Let's Encrypt created this project that allows us to generate certificates and sign them and update them all transparently in such a way that we don't even really think about it that much anymore. I think that's the answer for where we need to get to that level of simplicity with the packages that are being built and that we're depending upon with all of our applications. We need to get to the point where we're able to have that type of a project that can sign, it can prove where a package came from, and then it just help us to use that better in production. I'm not even going to get into SBOMs. I'm going to leave that there. Just know I would have spent 5 minutes on a diatribe about SBOMs. Fully automating application security tooling. I saw a talk at the OWASP Dublin conference. Snowflake, excuse me. Snowflake has actually built an AppSec program, and they talked about it publicly. I'm not saying something I'm not supposed to, where they had fully automated all of their tooling, so that their AppSec team didn't have to spend time kind of making tools work for developers. It was fully automated. So I think this is a future thing that we can get to that will be very powerful. Not going to seem like that big of an idea to say that artificial intelligence is going to stretch the roles of development and security. I don't think AI is going to write code for us. I don't think it's going to replace any of the things that we do as AppSec professionals. I don't see that in the short-term future. But I do think we're seeing things like, you can have a generative AI create a scaffolding for a particular developer for something they're trying to do. Like it's saving any level developer from trying to do kind of the basic things of just putting a block of code together. And so I think you're going to see generative AI kind of push us from that perspective, but also help with things like secure code reviews. I see that being a very interesting market for somebody to try to solve. A couple more, embrace a mindset towards safety and resiliency engineering. Like, I think this is where we have to go, and I think this is where we're going to go in the future. You think of like, aeronautics and security. The securities of the airplanes a lot of us flew on to get here. Like, you think about the way they've embraced safety and resiliency because of what the overall risk is. So I think as we go more into the future, we're going to see more of that kind of perspective. I think we're finally going to figure out secure architecture and design. I think threat modeling is finally going to be something that's not just talked about. It's going to be something that really has a huge impact on what we do. I think that comes down to really getting tooling that can take source code and help to pull that back into the design phase, because that's always been one of the biggest challenges with threat modeling is that we're trying to threat model something that's already existed for years and years. I think tooling that can help us pull that out of the source code is really going to be part of the answer. And the last one here is, I do think that both the United States and the world government in the next 10 years or so is really we're going to see software security regulations, and I'm saying with teeth, things that will really back it up. And, as I was building a product in the era of GDPR and had to go through and add all these different requirements to, make it so that users could delete their accounts, with note all the way out and, be able to segment all the data and whatnot. I'm still not going to say that I wouldn't love a GDPR in the United States. Now, some of you might not agree with me. But I will say as a personal privacy fan, I like what GDPR did as far as being able to give ownership of data to us, the people that are the data, that represent the data. And so I think we're going to see some type of privacy legislation in the US that's going to bring that same level of control here. All right, so what can you do with this? I said at the beginning you had to choose your own adventure and create your own action item list as you went, but I did kind of put a few kind of high-level thoughts. But I hope you were able to take away a number of action items of things to think about in your own environment. So, but I think some of the things that you can do coming out of this particular talk is, we talked a lot about different development environments and the security challenges that are brought upon them. Do you have a good grasp of that for your world, what you're responsible for securing? So we know there's a lot of diversity there. Think about the different threats and risks. Take a look at some of those OWASP projects to kind of refresh these different areas that I talked about, where you really need to understand state of the art of what the challenges are that we have to solve. And then, measure kind of where you are, people, process, governance, tools, technologies. And then I would encourage you also to think about the future of AppSec. Think about it from your own perspective. Where do you think we're going? What are some of the things you need to do inside of your organizations to make, kind of scope the future, scope what you want to get out of it and what you want to achieve. So from a key takeaway perspective, we talked about AppSec. We made a lot of strides in the last 20 years. We do have a lot more work to go. We talked about, complexity of environment, pieces in their security infancy. Too many people think of tools as AppSec. I talked about OWASP SAM as that perfect state, so I'd recommend going back, take a look at that, compare where you are today to what OWASP SAM prescribes at its various levels. I think that's very powerful. And at the end of the day, don't walk away from this thinking like I'm sitting here saying that, there's no hope, there's no future here in AppSec. Like I don't want to be the person who's just saying the sky's falling all the time. I think we have made a lot of progress. I think just looking at the top 10, OWASP top 10 is enough to show that we've pushed some things off that list over the years. So, we do have a lot more work to do. We have a lot more incremental improvements that we can make, but we have made some progress along the way. So with that, I think I may have left a minute or two for questions. I got 5 minutes for questions. All right, I'm right on time. So please come to the microphones if you want to ask a question here so that everybody can hear you in the room.
Test 1, 2, 3.
Yes,
can you hear me?
Please.
All right. Great talk. One question I had was the integration of SOCs, not SOCs, but Security Operations Center into monitoring applications. I seldom hear that talked about. Most of the time when they say that they're monitoring applications, they're monitoring infrastructure, but not the application itself.
Yep.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that we've really integrated those two things. And I think whether it's this year or 2024 or 2025, like the year of the application is coming. Like we've done so much work in like for example, the SOC is watching all of the security devices and all of the alerts coming off the desktop and laptop environments. Like I totally agree with you. Like the application is not somewhere that they've really matured the approach, and that's going to be where a lot of the challenges are that are happening right now. Yeah, if you could just go to the microphone, that'd be great. That way everybody can hear you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you. That's a very good summary. One thing that I'm not kind of like disagreeing on is the future of the automation part. You said it's you kind of predict that it's going to be 100% automated or fully automated, and I think this is very hard to achieve or not feasible at all, especially around most of the AppSec. They have AppSec tools. They have a lot of high rate of false positive. Most of them, I would say, I think about like average about 60% of false positive, and they require human intervention to just go through. Can you comment on that part, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, I think that number's I don't disagree with the number. I think that's the right number. I think the tool provider shouldn't be giving us something that generates 60% false positive. So yeah, to fully automate application security, the tools are going to have to mature along with that to get to the point where we're not dealing with such a high false positive rate. Totally agree. Like you can't automate something that's you can't automate the creation of JIRA tickets from false positives, or your program basically shuts down because developers are like, this doesn't make any sense. We can't fix any of these things. So yeah, but I think the tools and all of these different pieces have to mature alongside with making that move towards fully automated. That's why I thought some of these vendors that are approaching building their own SaaS, their own SCA, everything like in a box, it's all together. That's why I thought that was kind of interesting from a future of automation, because if everything is playing kind of in the same sandbox, I'm not trying to integrate a tool from one company and another tool from another. If it's all in the same sandbox, they should be able to give me some amount, like the SCA and the SaaS should be able to have some correlation happening as well inside of that box. So I think, but I agree. I mean, I think we got to have a more mature future to fully automate. The tools got to get there as well. Yeah.
Hello there. So my question here is, out of 3 pillars, people, process, and technology, that includes tools and other things, what are some of the challenges that you found and experienced over a period of time from the people perspective? I know like you talked about education, training, and those kind of things. In spite of those trainings, we still have code which is not very secure. So what are your thoughts on strengthening that pillar?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole idea of security champions is really where the only way I think we can manage that pillar, because we're not going to have enough security people to be able to coach directly our entire development teams, no matter where we are. And so security champions is that enabling function that helps us to bring developers, give them some higher level of training than even other developers, and then they become our conduit into the rest of the business. So I think it's really a resource and percentage of time allocation problem. Training is kind of the solution for that, but the bigger challenge is that there isn't a push for developers to care about security, to do the right things for security. And once again, that's that whole idea of security culture. Like, what's the culture that's been built over a period of time? It's reinforced by executive management. It's reinforced by everybody. This is how we build software. Like, we focus on security. It's a mindset change for a lot of places, though. It's not the norm. Yeah.
We know that we are facing a cybersecurity professional shortage, but a special challenge, at least in Brazil, but I think it's global, is to find complete AppSec professionals, that especially when we talk about secure architecture, to bring professionals with that experience and that capacity. How do you see this, and how can we deal with it?
Yeah, this is the challenge of where do we get the next generation of AppSec people is definitely a real one. It's something that I think we're all struggling with in the same boat. My kind of approach and my recommendation to folks is we have to build AppSec people from within. One, you probably can't afford the ones on the open market that are there. Like, you think about like what role in security has had a hotter like salary growth in the last couple of years? It's AppSec people, it's DevSecOps people. And so I just really think we got to build them from within. You got to start, looking in your champion pool to say, are there some people here that we can help go to the next level? Do they have an interest in becoming an AppSec professional? Those are the ones that you can pour into and really kind of help you to grow. And then you don't have to go to market and pay the top level of the market. And you've got the joy of growing and mentoring those folks and watching their careers flourish. Like for me, that's one of my favorite things is watching people that I've had a chance to mentor in some small way, and then I see, oh, they're working at this giant company as a senior AppSec architect now. It's like, wow, that's really cool that they've been able to get there. So I'm out of time. I'm going to hang around outside if you got any more questions. Thanks for being here today.